You'll own nothing and be happy. That's the phrase, I believe, that goes back to, believe it or not, 2016 in relation to the predictions of the World Economic Forum and so on. You'll own nothing and be happy. And that is, I believe, what this government is set out to do, in some respects at least. How would you feel if the government said, we are coming along, we are buying your house, and this is the price we're paying for it. We don't care if it's got development potential, we're buying it at this price. Well, that's something of a reality because there's a bill going through Parliament that a lot of people probably don't fully appreciate because it's a bit dry and technical and frankly a bit boring. But the real result of it is that people will get less money for their houses if the government says we are buying it whether you like it or not under a compulsory purchase order. Now, I've covered compulsory purchase orders in the past in more detail, so I'll link that video below if I can find it without going into the same details again. But for this video, I'm going to explain a little bit about what this bill is doing. Broadly speaking, it's very dry and technical, so I'll try and keep it simple. But first of all, if you like my brutally honest analysis of what the law is doing and why we should all be aware of it, because my biggest criticism of the law is that not enough people understand it, it's too expensive, it's too complicated, and I'm here to help you out. Hopefully, I humbly suggest at the very least. So please do subscribe to the channel, and I'll be very grateful for that. So, speaking of being grateful, I don't think the government is being grateful when and this goes for previous as well as current governments being grateful for buying your house by order. So believe it or not, if they are developing land nearby or they want to build new houses or they want to build infrastructure or roads or railways, or the big one that springs to mind is HS2. There's a lot of people that have had their houses compulsorily purchased and they're still waiting compensation and all sorts of stuff. That is a serious problem, particularly if they're not going to give you the value of the house. So this is the bill that I'm talking about here. It's the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Now, there's a lot more to it than this. There's a lot of other discrete sections, but this bit, by way of example, amends Section 14A of the Land Compensation Act 1961. In short, that act says you get some compensation if they buy your house against your wishes. And there are certain aspects where they can say, well, if your house has directly benefited in value because of the local authorities planning for that land, then you don't benefit from that increase in the value of the land. Now, that in and of itself is open for debate because why not? You own the land. If it's going up in value because of what they're doing on it, surely you should benefit from that. There's arguments on both sides of that coin. You know, you might say, well, it wouldn't be worth it unless the local authority is building that train station or building that road or building that shopping centre or building all the houses nearby, which obviously creates demand for the area because more people come into the area, and etc. and so on. But you might still say, well, it is fair because I own the land. But here's where it gets really tricky. What if they were to say, well, if there's even the remotest chance that your land has been indirectly affected by something nearby, and therefore your land is now potentially more valuable because of the shopping centre or the new train station, housing projects, you name it, whatever that might be. If there's a possibility that your land has increased in value because of that, well, they might not pay that either. They may just pay the flat standard rate without any of that uplift. They call that the hope value. Other people call it the real value because if you've got the land, it should be real value if there's a prospect for that land. Now think of things such as compulsory purchases for fields and agriculture, and they want to put wind farms or solar farms or whatever on it, and the value might go up. They might say, well, indirectly, because we've built one nearby, your land may go up in value because there's prospective planning permission, because we're doing this nearby and we're granting those permissions. If indirectly your land goes up in value, well, they can say we're buying your land, but we're not giving you that value for it. That is just one of the ways this bill would affect the compulsory purchase of your land. Now, I don't really agree with that. Now, there's a lot of arguments all over this, and this is the law that it amends because the Land Compensation Act 1961, Section 14, is taking into account the actual or the prospective planning permission. But what if you already have planning permission for your own house for your own purposes, or you're planning to do so? What happens then? We'll talk about that in just a moment. Don't go away. Just a brief aside, I think you know by now that I'm the kind of guy that likes to have things just work. I organize my life so that everything runs smoothly, all my ducks are in a row, and it makes for a seamless and painless experience. Now, I bring those things together for you and I present them in a way that I think will genuinely help you. And that is why I take partners on my channel now and again. I'm very selective about those partners, but one of them is Saily. Because when I'm traveling, and I will be very shortly, I like to have seamless internet connection on my phone. I don't like to worry about whether the mobile phone provider is going to cause all sorts of complications, as they did with my son last year. And so Saily is just that. It's an app that you download, you buy a package of data for the country of destination, and it works seamlessly on arrival. You don't need to buy any plan straight away. You can download the app and have it ready for when you do travel. And then when you buy a plan and install it as an eSIM, because there's no bit of plastic that arrives in the post, you don't need to fiddle and switch the SIMs around when you arrive. You don't need to buy a local SIM card and worry that you're being conned or it's an insecure SIM or anything of that nature. And you don't need to worry about connecting to their Wi-Fi's in case they're not secure. And because it's brought to you by NordVPN, it will also give you a virtual location and it's secure. And so it should eliminate all of those problems you might have connecting to your banking apps when you're in another country, because you can get a remote location. And again, because it's by NordVPN, you get security features such as checking for malicious websites, malicious downloads. And so keeping your device safe and certainly not relying on unknown sources or even your own mobile phone provider that may just fail, because we've had that happen. So it's very easy. You download the app, you buy a plan, and it will activate on arrival. Of course, as a partner to my channel, you get a discount, which is 15% off using the code BlackBeltBarrister at the checkout. So make sure you've got the app downloaded, and then when you're traveling, you'll be ready. Just buy a plan. Don't forget the code BlackBeltBarrister at the checkout. It will apply the 15% discount for you, and then you'll get seamless access to the internet. This is one way that I like things to just work. This just works, and you want seamless connection to the internet and everything you need to do online. This is how you do it. You get Saily, you download it, you're ready, and it just works. So thanks to Saily for sponsoring this video, but I genuinely bring you partners that I really think are going to help you. So download Saily to stay connected. So if you ordinarily have planning permission for your house, then obviously they should take that into account. But if it's only because of what the local authority is doing, then they can discount that. And that comes under this section here, cases where the prospect of planning permission is to be ignored and essentially disapplies section 14. Now, this bill does a few things among tidying up bits of law and that sort of thing, but also broadens the scope of when this section 14A applies, meaning it disapplies section 14, which is where you normally get fair compensation for the prospective value of your property based on the planning permission. If it wasn't obvious, if your property's got planning permission, it might be more valuable because you can add a bedroom, you can add a kitchen, you can knock the house down and build flats on it. Or if you've got a field, you can put solar farms or wind farms or whatever else on it, and that might make it more valuable. This broadly says if indirectly you benefit from local authorities' activities, you don't necessarily get the full prospective or hope value of the land. Let me know what you think about that one in the comments section below, because I don't really think that is fair. I don't really think that's value for money. That's an opinion. I think if you own the land, you should get the value. That's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But speaking of being fair or unfair, there's a second aspect relating to houses and another aspect entirely, all, I believe, as a result of this government. So back to things being unfair. What if you have a second home? Because from the original quote, you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, what if you don't own nothing? What if you own a house and you're fortunate enough to have worked all your life to then have a second home down by the sea or wherever it might be? Well, more than 150 local authorities are now introducing a 100% premium on top of normal council tax. Now, this has been going on for some time in various areas, and which is essentially making it far too expensive for some people to own this second home, because these bills for council tax now are in some cases doubling, if they've not applied it before, from a couple of thousand to over £4,000 a year, affecting hundreds of thousands of properties across the country, and just wiping out this dream that you might own that little holiday cottage down by the sea somewhere. They might already be expensive council tax because of where it's located, and it might be doubling if these local authorities are applying it to that area, and thus wiping out that dream for so many people. But not only that, now we talk about the unfairness of what's happening to private schools around the country, because this is going on still, and they rush this through at breakneck speed. Lots of things can come in a few years' time, but the VAT on school fees they had to bring in straight away because that's how they think. And in my view, based on a number of things I've read, and one of the clips I'll show you in a moment, which I think is disgusting, by the way, the attitude, shows me an example of what's really going on. And the classism and the politics of spite and envy is at the real heart of this VAT. Now, we read here that more than 200 schools are at risk of closing, and lots of them have already closed, and they say as a direct result of the VAT. Now, some people will say, well, they were struggling anyway. Well, if they are the pride of Britain, if the best schools in our country, and they are working as charitable organisations, many, if not most of them, to educate our children to the highest possible standards, is that not something we should be propping up and supporting, as opposed to making sure they get hammered and closed? Because, as some of them feel, education should be the same across the board. I think it's absolutely awful that these policies are forcing so many schools to be so close to closing, and some of them actually are closing. And many of them will cite, and they're probably right, that this VAT, on top of the employer national insurance and on top of the business rates, which now has been knocked back in the Lords, the damage is done for some of them because they might have been looking ahead, realised they can't budget for those business rates, and therefore had to close. So for some of them, it's already too late. But then we look at yet another example, and if anyone wanted an example of why this policy is so spiteful and evil that it should be walked back, is this one here. A private school announced its imminent closure after teaching for 270 years of British history. Fornic School in Pudsey in Leeds dates back to 1753. Not only have they had a decline in enrolment, but now combined with rising operational costs and obviously the VAT, employer national insurance, all these things have now brought it to a close, literally. And they forced this school to close, and it's part of our British heritage, has now been absolutely smashed to bits. And I think that's terrible. Frankly, I think this is a policy that will go down in history of one of the evil policies of any government ever to run this country. And if you want to be even more outraged and enraged about this whole policy, take a look at this short video clip here of Rachel Reeves' sister, Ellie Reeves, after she talks about being at karaoke, and then what she has to say about private schools. Have a listen to this.
If you were Prime Minister today, without any repercussions, what would you do?
Abolish private schools.
Really?
I would, yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Because I think they divide communities. I think that education should provide a level playing field for everyone, irrespective of family backgrounds or wealth or anything like that. I think everyone should get the same start in life.
So let's just be clear about this. The absolute elite of elite schools will not be affected by this policy. The people that send their children to those schools, and we're talking 50, 60 or more £1,000 a year, etc., they won't be affected by this policy. In the sense that their children will still go to, the vast majority of them, I suspect, will still go to those schools. Those schools will still exist. Those will still thrive. They will find a way around it. And there will be a divide still. I mean, there is a divide. I mean, I'm not saying a divide in the quality and standard of education and the divide in the society. I'm not saying divides are a good thing, but they are a reality. There are divides in reality. I've met some ferociously intelligent people in my time, particularly my time as a barrister, and across the spectrum of all different walks of life, doctors, nurses, accountants, all sorts of different professions where people stand head and shoulders above everybody else. And that is not to be critical of those that don't achieve those aspirations, but that is just a fact of life. These divides will exist. And for those that really do work hard, they will get themselves into those positions. Now, here's where I can say I did not go to a private school. I went to a very traditional comprehensive school. In fact, at my school, I was told not to pursue a career as a barrister. They said it would be too difficult, too expensive, too competitive, and I'd never make it because of people that go to private schools, etc. But that is obviously not the case. If you work hard enough and you really push for these opportunities, you can make these things happen. But what they're doing here is they are wiping out the middle bit where people are really fighting and working hard, particularly the parents who are fighting and working hard to send their children to the best possible schools that they can. This policy is wiping out that middle section. So the elite will remain and they will stay there. And the vast majority that cannot afford those sort of schools will remain where they are. But that middle gap where people are really thriving and aspiring to do more, they will suffer because they can no longer afford these policies. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is politics of spite. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you for sharing my mini rant in this video, but it's absolutely true, every word of it. I believe every word of it. And let me know what your aspirations are, because I am here, in my mind's eye, I am here to help you. So let me know what you think in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching.